On Building in Public, today featuring Kirat Pandya from Osmos. Welcome, Kirat.
Oh, thank you for having me, David. Misty, nice,
Yeah.
nice to be here.
Cool. So we were just admiring your background and noticing Seattle. It looks like a beautiful day in Seattle, lots of sun and
Yeah. The Seattle summers is one of our best kept secrets, right?
yeah,
No, we're based out of Capitol Hill. You can see behind me. That's
yeah.
Pike Street. You go 20 blocks that way, and it's what everybody thinks of Seattle as Pike Place Market. So
Right.
yeah.
So last summer, my wife and I traveled up to Seattle, and we were there actually exactly this date last year. I think we were in Seattle. And we went the other direction, went to Madison Park, and there's like an amazing beach. You don't think of Seattle as like a beach culture. There's an amazing beach. We went swimming there like every day. It's just the most gorgeous outdoor.
Yeah,
like,
there's a lot of
Lake
along
Union.
the water. Yeah, there's a lot of along the water spaces. There's a very large dog park that's right along the water up there called
Wow.
Magnuson. There's Golden Gardens, which is a beach along the Sound that is amazing. So yeah, the
Right.
cool thing about Seattle is you're about 2 hours away from any kind of geography that you want. You want to go skiing,
yeah.
it's right there. You want to go crabbing, it's right there. So yeah, it's a pretty
Yeah.
cool place to live.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
And you've been there for a while, it looks like?
Yeah, just over a decade now. So
Wow.
moved here straight
And
after college and.
what was it that originally brought you to Seattle? Was that you already sort of had that in mind, or the opportunity? I guess was Aquila Command your first?
Oh
role
yeah,
out?
no, Aquila Command was. Oh man, that's a flashback. That was.
Sorry, we're like
Ooh,
digging up all the
boy. No,
skeletons
that's
on
great.
LinkedIn.
Hey, no, I left them up there for a reason, right? Like, it's sort of where it was something I worked on in high school at that point, and so
Oh, wow.
Aquila Command was something where we were trying to build sort of automated, the ability to automate outlier detection and video surveillance for companies that have on premises people walking around, guards and stuff like that. Boy, that was a lifetime ago. But the reason I moved here was Microsoft basically hired me out of college. So University of Illinois, at that point at least, it was one of the colleges that they sort of hired the most out of, and so they snagged me from there, moved me up here, and then I never left. So.
And so, were you in Redmond with Microsoft, and then moved to the city later?
No, I always lived in the city. I would just commute. I
Okay,
just
got
paid
it.
the commute tax. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Fun. And then, so I'm looking at, it looks like you were 4.5 years almost at Microsoft. So that was quite a journey there.
Yeah. Honestly, Microsoft was very good to me. It was more than anything anyone could hope for early career. I got a chance to work on, start on Windows Phone 7. Yeah, people laugh about it, but it got to spread my wings. They, threw me in the deep end.
Yeah.
I worked on the cellular stack there. Then went on to help with the merging of the Windows kernels between the big Windows, as they called it, and CE, which was on the phone. But so sort of the most interesting thing I worked on there is, if you go back through the annals of time, if you will, there was a time when if you bought a USB, like a 3G, like a dongle for your laptop to get internet, you would also get a CD, because the drivers for that were not standardized. So one of the things I also worked on while I was there was the fact that you can just plug one of those things into any machine and it just works. There was like a standardization down at the USB layer inside the kernel, and so I worked on that. So that's cool. There was a lot of learning I got to do there, and we got to work with some really smart people along the way.
That's great. So we actually have maybe a little more in common than you might suspect. So I also went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Oh,
and
cool.
I did an internship at Microsoft.
Orange and blue.
Yeah. So I did this internship where, do you ever hear of Web TV?
Yes.
So
one of the people on my interview loop at Microsoft was one of the senior engineers on Web TV at one point. So, so yeah.
So I was working on a very similar thing where we had just acquired Web TV at Microsoft, and we were trying to integrate Web TV from its own kind of custom ASIC and custom OS to like the WinCE, Intel. Kind of, this was like late 90s.
It's a small industry. It's a very small industry, from that perspective.
Yeah, but that's funny. It sounds like some similar stuff. And then it looks like you you went out to, was it M87? Was that like a
Yeah,
startup?
yeah, it was a startup. So one of the when you work down in the cellular level, you realize that like all these modern devices that have cellular connectivity, all the radios interact. So you have to have an understanding of how cellular, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi coexist on the same device. So I got to learn a lot of that at Microsoft, and so I ended up joining an early stage company, M87. What we were doing there was basically enabling device to device automatic self-organizing mesh so that
Hmm.
devices could get better coverage and overall the cellular networks would be more performant. So the simple math was devices further inside buildings and lower coverage tend to bring down cellular performance for the whole network. And so
Hmm.
if you could let devices with poor coverage use their Wi-Fi chip to hop through devices with better
Hmm.
coverage, you could improve performance for everyone. So
Right.
that's what I worked on there. Yeah.
And was that a solution that was sold to the carriers who would
Yeah.
otherwise
So
be responsible for the data pipes?
yeah. So the solution, that's a story for another hour of its own.
Okay.
But basically, the solution was sold to carriers, and it had to come packaged on device. And one of the
Hmm.
challenges we faced was it was also the period where the carrier sells you the device was fading, right?
Yeah.
And more
Yeah.
unlocked phones were coming on. By the time I left, the company ended up pivoting to some new technology that enabled that too. But um,
Hmm.
network infrastructure caught up sort of, fast enough. Is the
Right.
story of that. So
And then it looks like
Yeah.
after that you were back at Microsoft.
yeah, so one of the things I did there was I ended up we were at that point on early Azure because I had
Mm.
relationships, and that was
Yep.
when you're a tiny company, you can pay for support or you can have relationships, and that unblocks things for you. So we were an
Yep.
Azure customer,
Nice.
and I happened to be one of the early customers for Cosmos DB. And so when I left M87, I was like, all right, what do I want to do? Well, I don't understand databases as well as I should, is sort of a deep seated feeling I had. So I went and joined Cosmos DB, worked under some of the most brilliant engineers I've ever met. This gentleman, Dharma Shukla, he's a distinguished engineer at Microsoft. And so got to work under him and the brilliant team he put together. And I worked on shipping multi region distributed support, both read and write. Uh, some of the hardest parts of distributed systems solved there while I was there. A lot of what I learned there around distributed systems is what we're putting to use at Osmos.
Hmm.
How do you connect systems where one system is able to spit out, a terabyte a minute at you, and another
Yep.
system falls over if you cross like a megabit of writes to it? And how do you build a reliable pipe between the two? Um,
Hmm.
sort of, it's sort of a follow on from all the learnings I had there. So it was an incredible sort of growth part of my career
Hmm.
when I
That's
went
cool.
back.
And then the Google
Yeah.
stuff seems like pretty integral to the Osmos founding
Hmm.
story. So I was curious
Yeah.
to hear about that too, and kind of like when did you start getting this itch that you found a need that you wanted to go build for?
So the the story there is I basically joined Google to help the big data side of the house, right? How do you grow the spanner business, the big query business, all of those things? And after I joined, there was a moment within the organization where people realized that, look, we're building all these like advanced ML technologies, techniques, but our larger customers really struggle to adopt them, right? Large companies have a hard time. Like if you give them an API and said, hey, here's this magical API, just plug it into your business process, it won't go anywhere. Um, there were stories of customers who worked on integrating APIs for 6 months, 8 months, and the demos would be fantastic and would never go anywhere because common example, oh, you hear the story all the time about vision, like, oh, in the future, when you get in a car crash, you'll just take a photo of your car crash and you won't need to see an adjuster, right? It will just
Hmm.
estimate the cost. Well,
Hmm.
one of the problems at scale is that's great, but there's an army of adjusters out there and they're going to be the ones taking the photo, and the tools they use don't work with this new demo thing that you've built, so it never gets adopted. So these kinds of problems are very common. And so that's where I transitioned into, okay, how do we take these advanced technologies and help large organizations consume them? And so as a part of that journey over the next, I don't know, 3.5, 4 years, time's a blur at this point, it became pretty clear to both Naresh and I, my co-founder and I. So Naresh and I, the way we met was at Google. He ended up on the same organization with me, trying to solve this problem. We were the first two there doing that. And then, so the point was, how do we take technologies, package them, make them consumable? And what became very obvious to us was most companies have their ducks in a row, mostly, right? Reasonably so, when it comes to data within their four walls. Oh, I have my SAP system, I have my Oracle, I have my, whatever enterprise, this is where my data, master data system that needs to exist. But the moment data needs to come from outside in or go inside out, everything was pain. So very common example, e-commerce companies, right? You're an e-commerce company, you've got a website, you're selling things. Well, it turns out you probably have anywhere between 50 and 3,000 suppliers. They're all sending you things like product catalogs, right? Updated every day. Yes, technically it's just a product catalog, list of items, how many, what's the cost? But each company sends it to you slightly differently. So unless you are a market maker where you can force everyone to use your API, you're forced to just receive the data. And now you've got this army of operational people trying to duct tape together Python scripts to bring stuff in. And so to answer your earlier question of how did this bug sort of bite us, it was basically that. It was you're watching these army of people struggle with this, right? You've got the execs talking about, we want to do AI, like Google, help us do AI. And people like Naresh and I are going, okay, that's great. We love that we did this deal, but guess what? The data is operating this way. And it's got no one actually knows the accuracy of it at scale, right? Because there's no automation really reliable around it. And so we realized that customers are basically spending anywhere between 8 and 15K a year per data pipeline, just keeping the lights on. And so that sort of snowballed into, holy crap, there's a big problem here around helping companies manage their data relationships. You build a business relationships, execs shake hands, right? And then the next step is, okay, now we got to exchange data. We got to exchange product catalogs. We got to exchange things like deal registration. We got to exchange warehouse information. There's always a data relationship that powers the business relationship, but there has never been reliable technology, easy to use technology that solves that. And so that's what we set out to solve.
And so I'm trying to imagine exactly what the first version of this solution looks like. Because you mentioned as a market maker, you can standardize around your standards, but when you don't have that power, you need to do all this effectively cleanup. So is that kind of first version of this helps you sort of ingest data and kind of automated cleanup of it? Is that kind of the right way to think about it?
It's a good way to think about it. So the way we talk to customers and our customers see us is we help product teams bring in clean, fresh customer, vendor, partner, whatever external data they need to power their product. Now that manifests itself in multiple ways, and we built a platform that enables that, right? In some cases, the problem is self-service. It's how do I empower? So if I'm a product team, I want to empower my end users to send me clean data, right? So it's how do I build good tools into my product so my customer can just upload data easily? The other end of the spectrum is I am selling analytics to, I don't know, pick a big name, I don't know, Nordstrom or whoever, right? Big retail firm. These retail firms are not going to give you clean data. They're going to be like, oh, here's a dump from my SAP, right? And me as a product company, I'm highly incentivized to quickly bring this data in and light it up in a way that my customer sees value quickly.
Right.
And usually this is done by, an army of data ops people to do that. And so the other end of the spectrum we service is how do we empower these data ops teams to 10x or 100x their productivity? So it's a platform that enables painless data transformation to bring clean data in. And then the way our customers consume it depends on whether they want self-service tooling or whether they want a white glove sort of pipelining experience. But either way, it's one platform to end-to-end bring in repeated, clean, fresh customer data very quickly.
I see. And is that I think there's something here about being able to do it very quickly because it helps with, is it like a sales process in case you're building software to sell to Nordstrom? You want to show it in their environment. Is that kind of the sweet
Exactly.
spot here?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Right. So put yourself in the shoes of a product company saying, hey, come try my product. Right. Let's say it's some sort of MarTech, marketing technology product. Well, your
Mm-hmm.
customer is going to show up and they're going to be like, okay, great. I see lots of empty pages here. How do I get my Salesforce data in? How do I get my Marketo data in? How do I
Right.
get my whatever, or in some cases, oh, I've lived in spreadsheets and I want to adopt your tool. Help me import my spreadsheet in
Yep.
and up level my experience. The data shows that the faster you can get your customers to that aha moment of like, holy crap, this is going to make my life better, the higher the chance of them turning into a paying customer. So that
Mm-hmm.
velocity from discovery to onboarding to activation, the faster you can do it, the better. And today we see customers struggle with this from anywhere from like a week to months.
Mm-hmm.
And with Osmos, customers, as they are adopting that Osmos, they're seeing that drop into days, hours, minutes, depending on the complexity of the data they're dealing with. So,
Mm-hmm.
so
And so
effectively, what we solve is that time to aha.
and that then is that's almost like your customer for Osmos is somebody who's building a software product that
Yes.
needs to sell that to a big merchant or something, for
Yeah,
example.
exactly. Right. So, so basically, if you live in the sort of, if you think about it as like the software supply chain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere in the software supply chain, you're constantly dealing with a changing supply chain, changing data formats, changing data
Yeah.
structures. So our customers effectively live in this software supply chain, and they're selling both products and services to their end customers. But they look a lot like data factories, right? Bring in data, provide value in some way out of it.
Yeah.
Right. And what were the first few kind of like experiments with potential customers like for you? Were you like very hands-on, kind of just helping them specifically? I mean, building something that they could use for their specific use case, or what was the early days of like testing out this idea?
So the early days, we went through a lot of learning, to be honest, over the last 2 years, right? And the learning was more around where does the pain truly lie, right? And so my advice to any startup founder at this point is the natural tendency, especially if you're an engineer, is pull out your code editor, let's go write some code. I know how to solve the problem. The reality is the problem is 80% organizational, 20% technology, right? And so the way I think about the tech we've built is we waited to build our core machine learning infrastructure. We did the R&D, right? Learning about how customers are doing, but the actual AI transformation engine, we waited until we fully understood whose pain were we solving? What was their actual pain, right? What did they wake up in the morning and think about, like, oh man, I need to solve this for my business today. This is a P0, right? And for us, that clarity was, wow, product teams really live by this activation, right? Getting customers in top of line. And their pain is the data looks different at every customer. And how do you make it simple to bring in? And so then once we had that picture, right, it was sort of the kernel of magic was our AI technology, and we can talk about that. But then the sort of the thing that made that truly useful and valuable to our customers was sort of the batteries included, the platform around it, right? Right from how do you connect systems to how do you monitor that? And then when things break, because invariably things will break in the real world, how do you break fix that easily without your business grinding to a halt? And that realization was sort of what fueled then saying, okay, Lounge, let's go double down and we know what to build.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what to build is 9/10 of the problem.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
Yeah.
And I'm also curious, like in the beginning, when you were like, did this instantly click for people, or what was your personal process of trying to like translate this idea into things that people were like seeing, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like related to their pain?
Yeah. So when we started sort of our journey talking to customers, so one of the sort of good things that's worked out for us is both Naresh and I have had this network that we built over our careers. So we were able to talk to, leadership at Fortune 500 companies, startups, sort of across the swath. And what was interesting was the problem resonated with everyone. It's like, yes, oh my God, external data, I have this problem, right? And the way, it's sort of this faster horse, faster cart problem, right? You go to customers and tell you, I just want better Python. I want to monitor my pipelines better. I want to break fix them better. And so our initial hypothesis was like the problem is the actual transport, things like maintaining access keys and all of that, right? Moving the actual movement of data. And as we talked to customers more and more, what became clear was that everything they were doing was really to try and compress the problem of data transformation down. The main pain was the fact that the shape of the data at one end was different than the shape of the data at the other, and they did not control the other end. They could not change it in any way, and it would change on them randomly because it's the other company, right? And so that journey from going from realization that, like, hey, connectivity is not the problem, it's data transformation, was what then became clear where we needed to invest sort of in our machine learning technology to solve this problem. And that's sort of how we started down the path of the real problem is there aren't enough developers in the world for all the systems that need connecting. And the only way we're going to fix this is if we empower non-developers to go connect systems. If we empower non-developers to teach machines, hey, here's how I want you to translate A into B, right? Instead of saying a developer must write the rules. Like, think of it this way, right? If I told you that in order for the world to do business, in order for the US to do business with India, everyone must know Hindi and English. Not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to be like, yeah, of course that doesn't work. So step 2 is if I told you, we're going to hire an army of developers, and they're going to manually write the transformation from one Hindi sentence to one English sentence and back, you'd laugh me out of the room. But that's how the world runs today. Every car you see on the street, the parts ordering process for that looks exactly like that. It's crazy. And so, you go deeper into this, like, how do we function? Like, how do power stations run? It's crazy. And so that's what we're trying to solve, right? How do we empower non-engineers, non-developers to be like, hey, I know what a PO looks like, a purchase order in a SAP system in my end. And when my partner sends me a PO from an Oracle system, well, I can read it and make sense of it. Why can't I, as a normal person, just tell the computer, oh, that's the PO number, that goes here. That's the dollar value, that goes here. Just give the system an example and let it sort it out. And so at the heart of what we're trying to solve is that, right? And then the accoutrements of what the systems look like, it's all how you consume the core technology. So sort of building on the experience from Google, which was, you solve the core tech, but then you make sure it plugs into the right places.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That brings it to light so clearly. And it is kind of, mind-boggling for someone who's not inside that process to think about how things actually work and how we end up having cars on the street.
Yep.
Without massive delays.
If you're interested, I've got a crazy example of that too to
yeah,
share.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you go into the automotive industry, right? And people will tell you, hey, oh yeah, we do this thing called EDI. We've done it for decades. And that's how all our ordering works. That's where we started, right? And Naresh and I started digging. So EDI, Enterprise Data Interchange, is a family of technologies that claims to be a standard. That's not a standard. There are 12 different types. There's a UN version and a US version. There's a German-specific version. And it's extremely brittle. It's only really designed for a set of scenarios like purchase to pay, right? Like I send you a purchase order, you send me stuff, I send you an invoice. Now, this technology was designed during the Berlin airlift, like going way back to World War II.
Wow.
It's still how a Tesla is made. It's still how Tesla orders parts.
Wow.
Now, on top of that, without getting into too much detail, this technology has ways to say, hey, you sent me some information, I reject it for this business reason. Very few people actually fully implement it. So today, if you're a supplier to, let's say, pick a big 4 automaker, right? And they order a part from you, and you're like, hey, I will ship it to you next month, a pallet of stuff. And they're like, no, I need it next week. They won't reject that automatically. They'll send you an email. So on one hand, you've got thousands of things going back and forth, automated, but failures are coming as
Oh
emails.
no.
And there's an army of people going like, oh, okay, let me go fix that. Oh, let me go fix that.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so if you think about the data interchange problem, it's how do you translate between EDI and email where you can't force either party to change anything and connect systems together. So the technology we've built scales all the way from like, I want to connect, I don't know, my Google Sheets to your Google Sheets, all the way to we have customers doing, I've got, my partner has got EDI and I've got Oracle, and they're both 10 versions old and we need to make them work together. So
Wow. That's pretty stunning.
yeah, I still look at cars and I'm like, how does that ever that industry? Oh my God. But
Wow.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
human toil, right? End of the day, it's human toil, and it's human energy being wasted on, like, think of it this way. It's huge numbers of people in cubicle farms and stuff like that going in and like copying, pasting from A to B. Do we really want humans doing that? Like, it's soul crushing. So, and at the end of the day, it probably, if I had to estimate, it's probably like a couple of percentage points on global GDP.
Right.
Yeah.
Is the impact of that. So.
Are there certain industries you think are particularly susceptible? Like you mentioned cars, or do you think this is like pretty pervasive across a lot of different businesses?
It's pervasive. How it manifests itself is different, right? So it depends on how power concentrated industries are on a few players. So automotive, again, there are a few players, long supply chain. Retail, there are lots of players. There's no real standardization. And so everyone's suffering. Even Amazon's suffering, right? They have some power around forcing APIs, but end of the day, even they're suffering because all the long tail of suppliers, for example, out of China and India and Vietnam, they're not adopting EDI. They're pen and paper businesses. At most, they'll send you an email attachment. Another example is logistics. In the logistics space, the US trucking industry is a long tail of like mom and pop trucking shops. They work with, centralized, there's a new sort of lots of Uber for trucking kind of players out there, right? And they're all dealing with this, which is how do I take orders from, I don't know, Macy's, again, I'm picking names here, and then figure out which of my 10,000 trucking companies should I pass the order to? And the capacity numbers are all coming as CSVs and Excel files from each of these trucking companies. So depending on the industry, the way the problem presents itself is different. But the core problem is you have N other partners, vendors, customers. They all send you data that looks a little different, and it's your problem.
So if Osmos is hugely successful, do we think about like a future where this is kind of used in place of email and EDI, or does it become like some sort of foundational kind of network that helps other players on-ramp or build their own customizations? Or what's sort of the right way to think about what this looks like kind of in the future?
The way I think this plays out in the long term is there will be industries that will fundamentally change how business is done, right? Where today, what's the norm is like attachments to email will be seen as archaic. Your customers will drop you if that's how you as a supplier operate. Right. You'll have to have modern technologies. And the way I see Osmos, look, to be brutally honest, this is a global GDP scale problem. Right. I have no illusions that like we're going to be the one company that solves it. But what I do know is that there is definitely a future where if you as a company don't have technology like ours to solve this, you will be left behind. It will be the way business is done. And from my perspective, we intend to sort of lay out what that future looks like, right? So that's our goal.
Normally be sold through, like today you're selling through a software company, but it sounds like you could imagine a parts supplier would need this, whether they choose to adopt a particular piece of software or not. So do you think you end up building solutions that may serve like a parts supplier that you mentioned, or are they always one hop away from kind of where you're focused?
So you got to start somewhere, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
we're starting close to where we truly understand the business software.
Yep.
But it's pretty clear to us that across healthcare data exchange, massive problem. Financial data
Mm-hmm.
exchange, massive problem. You pick an industry, this is a pain. And so we intend to fully grow into those, but we're starting where we understand and can fully empathize with the customer's pain.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then as that expands, you would get into other industries, but presumably like just in software, there's just tons of opportunity, right? I mean,
Yep.
it feels like an infinite problem in itself.
Yep. Exactly.
So when you think about sort of what you're oriented toward, is it going to be software probably for the next years and years, or do you think
I
are the
think
solutions much different? What might be required by healthcare or financial services?
I would love to be in my comfortable cocoon of software, not gonna lie, but I don't think our customers will let us be. So if you look at
Mm-hmm.
just on Osmos data and look at our customer logos that we put up, like you'll
Yeah.
see they're across a swath of industries already. And
Yeah.
so it's a question of like in this environment, how do we hire fast enough to fulfill
Right.
everything our customers want us to do, right? Like each industry has a slightly different problem and needs a slight tweak.
Yep.
And so that's what we're racing to do, which is hire quicker so we can solve more customer pain in more industries.
Right. Well, that's a good transition point to learn a little bit more about sort of the company and what are these roles you're hiring for, and how does the company run? What does it look like today? Where's it going? So maybe we can start just a little bit about like do you have sort of open roles right now that you're hiring for, and what are sort of the types of backgrounds or skills that you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of hiring, first and foremost, we're hiring opportunistically. So when we started Osmos, one of the things everybody told us was, man, hiring is going to be your hardest thing. Go focus on that. Go make it happen. So some of the technical choices we made early on, like for example, the company's built 100% on Rust. That's our primary infrastructure. That's our ML infrastructure. We run everything on it. Well, it turns out that if you plan your investments in the technologies, you can build a workplace and a solution that engineers enjoy working on. And so from that perspective, we've been incredibly sort of lucky with like just people excited to work here. Beyond that, in terms of open positions, we're hiring across engineering, technical sales, customer success, and sort of product marketing across the board. So from people listening, if you think what we're solving is interesting, we have something for you to do here. Like that's sort of where our mindset is right now. Specifically in terms of engineering, if someone wants to work on Rust full time and sort of build systems that move literally billions of records a day, an hour, eventually at scale is what it's looking like, this is the place to be. There are very few companies that will end up solving data movement with this much variety of the shapes of data along with velocity. So engineering across the board, we're hiring from there as well, from that perspective. So Rust is where
Rust is nice because it's kind of like a weather vane for talent. There's like a lot of very talented people love Rust. There's actually not a lot of companies that are so Rust focused, right? It's kind of a very specialized sort of interest.
I've had a few, entrepreneur friends, let's put it that way. We conversations about, hey, how'd you guys solve your early days? How'd you solve the hiring funnel? The truth is, you get a lot of advice around pick your tech stack that makes it easiest to hire people. The simple answer to that is don't build it just in Node because there are the most amount of JavaScript developers out there. That's not the right answer. The right answer is pick something where you will find engineers who are self-starters, right? Pick something at the bottom end of the adoption curve, right? Because that's where you will find people who are self-motivated and interested in working on cool new things and just learning how computers work better, right? And so our team is full of people like that, right? And the side effect, you'll notice things like I'm gonna put one of our engineers on the spot, but like mechanical keyboard community, right?
Yeah.
Half the engineers all have their own custom mechanical keyboards here, and they like
That is
their
so
free
cool.
time they're soldering things to put together. Like that's the kind of community we're trying to build here, right? And Rust was something I picked early on, both for it being the right tool for the right job, and there are lots of technical reasons for it. But I would be lying if I said that this also didn't factor into it, right?
Right. And what does the team look like today? Like how many people work together on Osmos today?
Yeah, so we're 11. It's growing fast. So I think the last official count is we're at 11 right now. We've got a sort of larger non-direct sort of global force as well that we're hiring across the board. So we think we'll be at 20 plus by end of year if we can make that happen. But generally speaking, I'm a believer in scarcity drives innovation. So we will always hire smart people that come our way, but we also hire from the perspective of we're not just going to throw people at the problem. We will build better technology to make us do output better. So.
Right. And I noticed on the website, it looks like the roles, are they mostly based in Seattle, or you mentioned kind of some worldwide stuff? Like how does the sort of in-office remote kind of distributed trade-off work?
So as with everyone, we're navigating that. So even before COVID, we've always been super flexible, right? No one was keeping hours, get your stuff done, you're done, right? So from that perspective, we were hybrid by definition. I don't know what the term is for that, but where we are going from here is that we really want, one thing we learned, right? This team learned during COVID is there are certain deep technical problems that are very difficult to solve without a whiteboard in the same room. And so we're going to keep core engineering based out of Seattle with the idea that you don't have to be at the office every day. I don't care if you work from home half the week, but the idea is that your coworkers and you can depend on the fact that there's a place for you to come on short notice and collaborate on a problem you're stuck on. And then once you solve that problem, there's just 10,000 lines of code to write. Go ahead, go on home and work from home if you want. That's sort of how we operate. From a larger organization perspective, our go-to-market teams, global. Our marketing teams, global. Sales, global. All of that will be global. And then finally, we're also standing up an international team in engineering that is going to focus on helping us build lots and lots of connectors to systems. So one of the things customers are always asking for is, oh, can you connect to my XYZ system that I bought 10 years ago that there's no documentation for? And so that problem lends itself to like pick an engineer, assign them the problem, and then they can go solve it. And so for those kinds of roles, we're happily hiring global. And
is that global do you have any co-location spots, or is it just wherever anybody's got an internet connection? And
generally, it's anywhere you've got an internet connection. Honestly, the most difficult thing to navigate is time zones. It becomes, if the role is such that, so we do this matching, right? Of like, we meet a great engineer and we work with them on what do you want to work on, right? And then from that, there is okay, who else within the company will you have to work with? And then figuring out a way, making sure that like there isn't this one poor developer in the middle of all of it who's waking up at 6 a.m. for one team and going to bed at midnight for the other team, right? So we're taking a very thought through approach to the problem.
And so is the org kind of broken up, if I'm hearing right? There's certainly like kind of core platform and then maybe sort of a separate, is it almost like an integrations group or kind of
separate... pretty much. Yeah, there's an integrations group, and then there is a core. What I think of as like core platform engineering is based out of Seattle. Yeah,
and there's a lot of the.
Sorry, go ahead. Now I was going to say the great thing is like all three big cloud players are in Seattle. All of the big the distributed systems talent is very heavily concentrated in Seattle, so that's been pretty cool for us. Hiring out of Google Cloud, Azure, AWS. Facebook. Yeah.
Is there a lot of already Rust talent from existing cloud providers, or is this something that you meet people at like a hackerspace or a meetup, or what does that look like?
So it turns out that there's a lot of smart engineers who would love to write more Rust as a day job because it's just a great language to work with. Unfortunately, their employers don't let them do it. And so we are happy to welcome them here and be like, yes, you will do Rust all day. You're welcome to it. So yes, they want to, they don't get to. And so we would happily welcome them here.
That's cool. I'm also curious, this is kind of tangential, but about the 42 layers name story and like what inspired the transition.
Yeah.
So, oh boy, that question. Okay, so let me take a stab at that. So, Naresh and I were really struggling. This was like late 2019, around picking a name, and we knew that whatever we thought the company was going to build at that point there was a good chance it was going to change. So picking a name that locks you in doesn't make sense. So we thought about it, and what we came to was, look, we know we're going to build something based on machine learning. Well, let's talk about that. And that turns out to be, what does a machine learning engineer in the modern day do most of the time when they're doing engineering? They're kind of deciding the layers and the shape of the neural network. So layers. And then how many layers? Well, 42, the answer to the life, universe, and everything else. So 42 layers. As you can imagine, it's a very, it has a very narrow cultural appeal, right? Unless you've read Douglas Adams, you don't really get it. And customers were always asking us, like, wait, so your system has 42 layers? How does that work? Okay, fine.
And then how did you go from that to Osmos then? So you worked on Cosmos, right?
Cosmos. So Cosmos, oh boy.
That's
no relationship there.
Totally.
Unrelated. Cosmos DB was a rename from what used to be Document DB. At the same time, Amazon renamed one of their things to Document DB. Crazy times.
Oh my gosh.
No, for us, Osmos came from, we spent a lot of time thinking about, like, what is a real world analogy for the problem we solve, right? And the thing that comes to mind is, let's say you have a water tank to fill, right? Just simple, you have a water tank you want to fill. Today, what everyone is doing to fill this water tank is they're going to the warehouse, the store, whatever, buying bottled water, i.e. CSV files, walking it over, pouring it over one by one, going back doing it. What do? We build a pipe straight to the reservoir. We get you the data clean.
Right.
Like
and that's where the whole osmosis reference comes in. And so Osmos.
Oh, great. Oh, that's great. I love that. That's a very very relevant kind of idea. It has like a nice image that associates with it.
So you'll see us talk about it more too in the future. We find that resonates with customers a lot as well. So it's very easy to talk about abstract, clean data, large volumes, but like when you really tie it to like, oh yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't buy bottled water to fill a tank. Like, that's dumb.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the analogies make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Somehow every team I've worked on has eventually labeled me as the analogy guy. So there's that.
Oh, nice. That's cool. I was also curious, like, given so much time like spent at these great teams at Microsoft and Google and kind of like bigger organizations and like with a lot of engineering talent, if you've like, what best practices from there did you specifically want to bring over to a much like more nimble kind of fast experience like you're in now?
Yeah. So I think the best practices would be figure out what your guardrails are. And so what I mean by that is, before you start writing code, go build your simple like automatic build pipeline. Go build the basic infrastructure that is your guardrail to operate within, so that then you can iterate on the code and you're not fighting this like infrastructure every day. Because like the tendency is like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it manually now, I'm going to automate it later. But regardless of what software you build, having a good build pipeline is going to always be a ground zero. You're going to have that. So solve those problems first. Get your ducks in a row. Make sure you don't take shortcuts on security from day zero. Like, for example, from day zero, everything we did was two-factor auth. Everything was stored in, making sure like encrypted at rest was always checked from day zero. If you solve those things early on, then the truth is, as a nimble company, you will write code 3 times before you keep it. The first 2 prototypes you will delete, right? So don't worry about that. Write code, throw it away, but make sure your infrastructure around you is your guardrails. What that will also help you with is when it's time to get things like compliance. Oh, you need to be SOC 2 compliant, you need to be HIPAA, you need high trust. You'll find that the work is actually now just collecting evidence. It's not actually going to be like, holy crap, we didn't secure that system. So at big companies, there's usually other teams that are doing this for developers. So it's a blind spot, right? It's things if you're a line engineer at any of the, the FANGs, if you will, you're not thinking about this. You've got your little thing to do. You submit your code and this big machine takes over. Well, now you're better off thinking about building that big machine first, then go, move fast and break things, or whatever the latest fad way to describe that is.
And how do you balance that with, because it sounds like that's sort of like, in a sense, open up, your text editor and start jamming, whereas you're actually spending a lot of time out talking to customers and, tapping your network to try to figure out, are you solving the right problem and whose pain does it solve? So how do you, like, in a sense, they're sort of competing goals or needs. How do you sort of think about balancing that from the start versus sort of how it evolves?
I'll give you an answer that attempts to satisfy, and then I'll give you the truth. How about that? So sure. The answer that attempts to satisfy is, look, it's hard, but you kind of have to do both. And the answer is, don't write a lot of code early on. Go talk to customers. They'll tell you what they want. Listen to them, and then build something that solves one customer's problem. That's the satisfying answer. The truth is, there isn't a clear answer. Part of an early stage founder's job is to figure this out. End of the day, your entire ability to make the company survive through a Series A is going to be dependent on your ability to correctly figure out that formula. Your whether or not your company survives to A is not going to be based on whether you built the best product at that stage. It's going to be dependent on whether you built the right product. And that's the mix of, did you build the right Figma prototypes and, do fake demos for customers? Did you hopefully not end up building a faster cart when you built the car instead? Because your customers are all going to ask you for a faster cart. So that is a balancing tightrope that you have to walk as a founder. And I feel like there's an entire industry built around giving advice around what the right thing to do as a founder is. The truth is, hard things are hard because they're hard. This is one of those things that is the hard part of it, right? If you're an engineer, every fiber of your body is going to be like, this customer thing is confusing and difficult. I know how to solve it in code. No, you don't. If you're not an engineer and you have a CTO you're working with, let's say, and you're the CEO and you're trying to solve it, then every part of you is going to want to have those conversations with customers and understand the problem, because the tech requires some sort of big jump in your understanding, and you're going to avoid that. You can't do that. So you have to pick your weakness and you have to battle it, and then find the balance for you. Unfortunately, that's the answer, right? That's the truth of it.
Yeah. And that sounds like kind of find your weakness and kind of find the way to work on your weakness and sort of listen to the voices that are turning you away and sort of turn towards it. And then I would guess, though, as you get more talent and people and customers around the table, you maybe start moving away from some of those instincts. Do you feel like that had a natural transition point for you, or are you still kind of in that process right now?
So one of the great ex-founders, executives, advisors that, one of our VCs connected us to. And by the way, founders, this is like, good VCs will actually help you in your journey, right? That founder had this very good point, which is the things you do as a founder from 0 to 1 are exact anti-pattern of what will make you successful from 1 to 5. And the difficult thing when you reach 1 is recognizing that happened. So part of why single founder companies are less successful than co-founder led companies is because of exactly what you said, which is that it's very difficult to recognize this is my gap, whereas your co-founder will happily point it out to you, right? And they should. And so regardless, sit down, figure out what am I avoiding doing because subconsciously I don't like it, I don't enjoy it, it's making me uncomfortable, and then go do more of that. Because chances are that's where your blind spots are.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. How do you try to do you try to systematize that in some way, or how do you and your co-founder kind of approach that sort of like periodic check slash, checking each other and checking each other's decision-making process?
Yeah, so I feel like Naresh and I have been incredibly lucky, but I'll just speak for myself even. I've been incredibly lucky to start working with Naresh from that perspective, is from our, like, that we met, right? Because we're very good at, one, complementing each other's weaknesses. But also I think we've developed a relationship where we can point it out to each other, right? We feel comfortable after a customer call being like, that was not good. Here's what you could do better, right? Of course, messaged a different way, but like the idea being there's an open line of communication with your co-founder. And I think that's key. The second piece around being systematic about it is the truth is I've always struggled with that. I've tried probably 15 to-do apps. I've tried it all. My answer to that is my first hour in the morning after I wake up, I will go slow. Even if the day is on fire, I will spend the first hour slow rolling my morning routine, classic shower thoughts thing. And that, honestly, that is my most insightful hour of the day, because I'm forced to do nothing. I can't be near my computer. I'm just forced to think. And if you can bring yourself just in that moment to spend 30 seconds being like, okay, what is it I'm avoiding doing today?
Right.
I think that's enough to get you going.
Right. Yeah.
I wonder,
it's so easy to wake up and just like instantly be on your phone and check your email, and then you're just like,
don't do that. Don't do that.
It almost sounds a little bit like a meditation practice in a sense, right? Like you're in the shower, the drips are falling over your head.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that formal. It's just it's you time, right? A dark way to put this is the graveyards are full of people who are indispensable, right? And so from that perspective, you're not going to be missed for an hour in the day. Take that hour; it'll be your most valuable hour. So.
And have you found that it sounds like kind of your co-founder relationship has been helpful for kind of checking each other, and there's some maybe tug of war, push and pull there. And then it sounds like maybe some of your investors have been helpful in other ways. Do you sort of look to broaden your network? Like, have you explored coaches, or do you feel like you already get enough of that from people that you sort of already are involved in the company in one way or another?
So I have a controversial, at least I think it's controversial, opinion on coaches. Look, there are some general truthisms around how to build a business and startups and all of that. But the truth is, if you're building, and I can only speak to a VC-funded startup, right? I'm not going to speak to bootstrapped. Right. If you're building a VC-funded startup, the set of challenges you run into will be unique to exactly the problem you're solving. So even if you go find someone who has done a very similar business, but in the past, chances are the challenges they ran into are not the same as what you're going to run into. Now, that is not to discount the wisdom of experience. So the coach thing, I don't think of it as a coach thing as much as surround yourself with people who have solved problems of similar size, scope, scale, and area. And then from there, know that they will give you advice thinking what they did in the past is repeatable. 99% of the time it's not. But there's a lesson there that you can adapt to your problem. So you kind of have to do that. So when I give advice to people, right, if someone asks me for advice, I will stop myself from saying, oh, do this. My way of giving advice is, in your shoes, this is how I would think. And for this reason, this is what I would do. And that sort of also doesn't put pressure on the receiving party to be like, I need to do this, right? It's very clearly stated as my reasoning, and that's it.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's nice to have those kinds of communication rails where you can, you can actually have an exchange without creating a lot of pressure in such a relationship. I noticed we're headed toward the end of the hour, and we haven't even had a chance to catch up on your life outside of work and sort of what the rest of Kirat's existence is. So we could actually go a little bit toward some of our wrap questions. Are often we like to learn a little bit about like, what are you curious about in the world? And it could be something related to the business, but it could also be something, just other broad questions that you have, whether it's, a question for the broad world or the future of science or technology or something with your family. It's very open-ended, but could be profound, could be very simple. But are there any things in particular that you're curious about these days?
So I don't have a short answer to what I'm curious about, but I'll tell you what motivates me, right? I see my presence on this planet as like, if I'm here, I better contribute to something that moves the needle. If I'm not doing that, like, why am I even here? Like, what's the point? I'm probably like here consuming resources someone else could probably, someone who was going to move the needle would find valuable, right? Probably a dark view for most people, but that's sort of how I think about it. And so from that perspective, I think there are certain, end of the day, look, technology doesn't solve all problems, but it does move the needle, right? It creates new problems of its own, but it solves some very horrible problems we have as a species, right? We've got people dying of hunger around the world. Well, guess what's that problem is? Logistics. The United States, I read the stat somewhere, produces and throws away enough food to feed every human on the planet 2,200 calories every day. The problem isn't we can't produce the food. The problem is we can't distribute it. And it's a logistics problem. And a large part of the logistics is what Osmos is solving, which is not to say like, hey, look, another reason Osmos, right? What I'm trying to say is like, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. And that's sort of going to be the trend of what I'm doing for my career, right? That's what I aim to do. That's what motivates me. Same thing with, the race to Mars. I view it as like an unlocking technology to bring, it's not about abandon Earth. It's about bring resources down to ease the stress on our ecosystems, to make it more available to everyone around the world. What if we lived in a post-scarcity economy? So that's sort of my motivating factors on a day-to-day. I don't have interesting answers like, I go do, I don't know, roller derby as a hobby, but this is what I spend a lot of my time.
Yeah, we love to get insight into what motivates you and what drives you, and we can see sort of how it's connected to a broader mission for the world.
And I appreciate that like deep optimism in a way, because there's a lot of just like cynicism about tech overall, and just to be like, okay, I think that I can play my part and start here and like actually start doing it. It's refreshing.
Yeah, and it's also turning it into, I wish as a society we would have a better discourse about these topics, because if we make certain topics verboten because the billionaire of the hour did something that pissed off a part of our society, like we need to be more open about these communications. If we shut the door on technology, we shut the door on progress. So
great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Thanks for spending the time with us and sharing all about yourself and your story with Osmos. It's been great to hear and kind of get some of that perspective on what you're all about and your motivation.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. That's great.
Wonderful. Okay.
Hopefully we can inspire another generation of founders.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.